Alright, it's time for Dwarf Fortress Histories of Jealousy and Diligence. It's a new day, a new year, a new Dwarf Fortress project. And we're going to finally begin a very long-term project that I've been wanting to do for years. But I've never gotten around to doing it because it's pretty daunting at times. It takes a measure of commitment. It's not super complex. But as I said, it takes commitment because my plan is simple. I want to craft a beautiful world with a perfect balance of good and evil and every type of biome that exists within. And after many days of learning the world generation, I was able to manipulate a world that more or less has everything I could ever want. So my plan is to exist within that world for one real world year. So from January 1st until January 1st, I plan on using one single world for Dwarf Fortress, and to consistently play that world of Dwarf Fortress throughout the year. Won't always be long streams, but I will stream consistently from now until next year. Sometimes the streams will be full years, sometimes they'll just be a single season. But the plan is simple. Build fortresses, go on adventures, and read the lore. And when I say I spent days manipulating the world generation, I'm very serious about that. I spent actual days of time learning how to manipulate the world generation, forgetting how to manipulate the world generation, and then kind of learning how to manipulate it intrinsically without much thought, and more banging two rocks together to get what I want. And that's what I did. And I have such a wonderful, wonderful world built. The world of Umomnar, more commonly known as the Dark Oblivion. Now I have two save files of Umomnar, the Dark Oblivion. I have the main save, and I have a backup save. And I will consistently be making more backup saves as I play, because it's always good to have a save file for each fortress and each adventure that you go on. And that's the plan. So, we're just going to get into it, because the first plan is we're going to look at the lore of the first year of Umomnar, the Dark Oblivion. Because the world currently sits at the 1st of Granite, January 1st, of the early spring of year 2. Which means that the world history that currently exists goes from the 1st of Granite of year 1 until the 1st of Granite year 2. It barely touches year 2, but there are some events that do occur in year 2. So whether we look at the backup or the main save, the lore is going to be the same. So let's click on the main save. We'll load in all the objects, even though we won't be actually going into the world map itself in this stream. We're just going to simply be looking at the lore. Of course, we have 4 buttons we can choose right at the gate. Select a game type to begin. Fortress. Embark with a group to start a settlement. Your citizens will build, mine, craft, trade, fight, and manage as you guide your outpost through its history. Design the shape and purpose of the fortress by issuing orders for the residents to follow. You can play a sequence of fortresses and adventurers in the same world. Migrants from retired and abandoned fortresses may come to visit, along with any surviving adventurers. Adventurer mode. Directly control a single individual or party. Follow destiny or strike out on your own. Explore, quest, fight, and perform. Visit your own retired and ruined settlements. Serve a deity or become a creature of the night. You can play a sequence of fortresses and adventures in the same world. Uncover locations and artifacts for the benefit of your future fortresses. And then we have Legends mode. explore and investigate the history of the world as it stands. Events in other modes are incorporated here, which means when you finish a fortress, when you finish an adventure, whatever happened during that time frame then gets rolled into the legends, and then you can access and read the lore. And of course, the last option we have is back to title menu. So, we're going to look at the legends. We're going to explore the history of the Dark Oblivion. Now, we have many categories to look at. We could look at historical figures, in which there are 2,826 of those. We could look at the sites, in which we have 599. Codices, scrolls, and other written works, which currently only include slabs. There are 17 of those. For regions, there are 213 regions, and underground regions, there's 867. To my understanding, regions and underground regions are a static number and won't change. As far as civilizations and other entities, there's currently 215 of those. And for structures, there are 52 structures. But to make it nice and simple to read and know what is actually going on, we're going to simply look at the chronicles by age, because there's only one age, and that is the Age of Myth. Mind you, the Age of Myth, within 1 year, does have 3,298 events occur. So, we're going to read through the entire chronological timeline of year 1 of Umomnar, the Dark Oblivion. So let's look at the Age of Myth. The Age of Myth was a time when living gods and mighty beasts still held sway. In 1, the dwarf Isam Pleadicrafts became the queen of the Red Guild, the first dwarven civilization. In 1, the ultimate tongs of the Red Guild founded Sterncrafted. The elf Akaf Groviel became the druid of the Saffron Sweetnesses. The strapping skin of the Saffron Sweetnesses founded Rosy Prairie. The lizard brute Slet Matchburied the Faded Urn thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Tower of Play, and established a gateway between worlds in Steel Finds. Slet Matchburied the Faded Urn became the master of the Witch of Defenders. The strapping lies of the Witch of Defenders founded Steel Finds. The Singed Band of the Kingdom of Certainty founded Windlabors. In 1, the mammoth devil Thanaka the Subtlety of Hexes thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Towers of Plague, and established a gateway between worlds in Nightmare Trash. Thanaka the Subtlety of Hexes became the master of the Nightmare of Drying. The Torments of Chilling of the Nightmare of Drying founded Nightmare Trash. In 1, the Fenced Councils of the Embraced Union founded Neobulbs. In 1, the elf Oda Godly Couple became the druid of the Closed Embrace. The Tattooed Beaches of the Closed Embrace founded Prophet Zephyrs. The dwarf Zaxul Agelancer became the queen of the Nets of Roughness. The Lancer of Wishes of the Nets of Roughness founded Scour Crystal. The group of chanting of the Nation of Irons founded Limboil. The dwarf Onul Paint Boots became the king of the Coincidental Cloisters. The town of Oranges of the Coincidental Cloisters founded Rimchant. The camel monster, Engo, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Fortress of Attack, and established a gateway between worlds in Hell Polish. Engo became the master of the Sins of Control. The Doom of Curls of the Sins of Control founded Hell Polish. The elf Ruyava Champion Embrace became the druid of the Velvety Fin. The Sandaled Fin of the Velvety Fin founded Tired Wax. The elf Kolovi Squeezingorge became the druid of the Triangular Birds. The Clam of Dots of the Triangular Birds founded Rain Odors. The dwarf Godin Plankmute became the king of the Rock of Washing. The special wheels of the Rock of Washing founded Sculpted Hall. The lizard devil Imi thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Deep Bastion, and established a gateway between worlds in Silver Plague. Imi became the master of the Abysmal Cruelty. The everlasting round scourge of the abysmal cruelty founded Silver Plague. The High League of the Late Realms founded Paint Stream. The Black Demon, Akim, thrust a spire of slate from the underworld, naming it the Lone Palace, and established a gateway between worlds in Poison Webbed. The Black Demon, Akim, became the master of the labyrinthine cruelties. The Scorpion of Freckles of labyrinthine cruelties founded Poison Web. The elf, Asithi Roniswood, became the druid of the Crow of Cudgels. The Ardent Raptor of the Crow of Cudgels founded Ball Flute. The dwarf Mebzith Clambrass became the queen of the Whip of Competitions. The Tower of Healers of the Whip of Competitions founded Labor Bloom. The group of Zephyrs of the Confederacies of Dwelling founded Sprayed Relief. The llama monster, Gore, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Ruined Citadel, and established a gateway between worlds in Doomslings. Gore became the master of the Merged Deceiver. The seducer of crying of the Merged Deceiver founded Doomslings. The Amber Group of the Union Grooves founded Fury Stances. The dwarf Kogan Riftwheel became the king of the Pattern Mechanisms. The Armor of Flax, the Pattern Mechanisms, founded Hatchet Scribes. The elf Nemo Embraced Style became the druid of the Raven of Rasps. The Pax of Proliferation of the Raven of Rasps founded Tempted Snarls. The Society of Muffins of the Hairy Unions founded Price Wasp. The rabbit brute Pife thrust a spire of slate from the underworld, naming it the Confusing Palace of Veils, and established a gateway between worlds in Vile Chunky. Pife became the master of the Fed Demon. The Seducer of Disgust of the Fed Demon founded Vile Chunky. The elf, Athithi Dabbling Thunder, became the druid of the Wave of Mists. The Splattered Periwinkle of the Wave of Mists founded Creedforded. The dwarf, Lorbem Shoothands, became the king of the Courageous Guild. The Royal Manor of the Courageous Guild founded Lancegood. The dwarf Azon Silver Weekend became the king of the Quiet Sword. The Cudgel of Mortals of the Quiet Sword founded Past Ore. The elf Len Soldfords became the druid of the Roar of Mortifications. The Euphoria of Frills, the Roar of Mortification, founded League Blaze. The tortoise monster, Snowdub, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Palace of Births, and established a gateway between worlds in Hatred Posts. Snowdub became the master of the Nightmare of Depressing. The Deceiver of Crypts of the Nightmare of Depressing founded Hatred Posts. The Society of Gliding of the Ferocious Confederacy founded Waveclaws. The elf Yemi Furris became the druid of the Thunder of Strangers. The Venerable Sky of the Thunder of Strangers founded Jungle Wondered. The Opossum Devil, Ura Menace Wraith, thrust a spire of slate from the underworld, naming it the Profane Palace, and established a gateway between worlds in Menace Silvers. Ura Menace Wraiths became the master of the Amusing Plagues. The Plague of Pricing of the Amusing Plagues founded Menace Silvers. The Society of Glens of the Colorless Kingdom founded Drumcot. The dwarf Zeneg Oilylance became the king of the Grey Vault. The Furnace of Scholars of the Grey Vault founded Folded Gold. The Horse Devil Ugoth Skullsplit thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Towers of Shadow, and established a gateway between worlds in Monstrous Claimed. Ugoth Skullspit became the master of the Monstrous Jackal. The Scourge of Circles of the Monstrous Jackal founded Monstrous Claimed. The League of Orbs of the Empire of Boards founded Kindletreat. The elf Quithari Okenno became the druid of the Magical River. The greatest windy blazes of the Magical River founded Blossom Vales. The dwarf Lorbem Weekentraded became the king of the Late Razor. The Dye of Blushes of the Late Razor founded Haimgrand. The elf Nino Ramblunges became the druid of the Buck of Sieging. The Wayward Drink of Splattering of the Buck of Sieging founded Sealanced. The Skink Devil Shastal Fortress Gloves, the Just, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Whirling Towers, and establish a gateway between worlds in Poisoneel. Shasdal Fortress Gloves the Just became the master of the Autonomous Spider. The monster of authority of the Autonomous Spider founded Poisoneel. The Band of Moths of the Considerate Union founded Trumpet Joys. The dwarf Kel Paddlewashes became the queen of the Cloudy Crystal. The dominant fences of the Cloudy Crystal founded Tulone. The wombat monster Asithi thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Fortress of Fate, and established a gateway between worlds in Fool Hell. The wombat monster Asithi became the master of the Nightmare of Warding. The Banded Malice of the Nightmare of Warding founded Fool Hell. The Healing Band of the Obedient Union founded Lockdells. The dwarf Latast Braveton became the queen of the Whip of Workers. The Blameless Sax of the Whip of Workers founded Lightningcraft. The elf Salo Shorewinds became the druid of the Smooth Mist. The Gloss of Silk of the Smooth Mist founded Tundra Riddled. The boyish council of the future confederation founded Brimsplate. The Scarlet Brute, the Ripe, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Lush Castle, and established a gateway between worlds in Stocky Demonstrous. The Scarlet Brute, the Ripe, became the master of the Solitary Devil. The Immorality of Metal, the Solitary Devil, founded Stocky Demonstrous. The elf Iwethi Jungle Lancer became the druid of the Fabulous Creature. The equivalent hooves of the Fabulous Creature founded Wispy Blown. The dwarf Enith Zealpaddle became the queen of the Whiskered Spear. The natural trades of the Whiskered Spear founded Faithfulton. The one-eyed demon, the Aquamarine Petals, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Sable Fortress, and established a gateway between worlds in Waxy Cruelty. The one-eyed demon, the Aquamarine Petals, became the master of the Free Nightmares. The Seductions of Daubing of the Free Nightmares founded Waxy Cruelty. The Society of Deciding of the Livid Nations founded Vaulted Patterned. The elf Ula Dawn Partners became the druid of the Rivers of Sport. The amusing Saturninity of the Rivers of Sport founded Glimmersocket. The elf Quithari Desert Ponder became the druid of the Humid Den. The Lion of Love of the Humid Den founded Buckriddles. The Salt Monster, Kutzmob Wastador, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Sinful Gristly Tower, and established a gateway between worlds in Maligned Wonders. Kutzmob Wastador became the master of the Learned Hate. The Somber Spiders of the Learned Hate founded Maligned Wonders. The Coalition of Shows, the Confederacy of Crab, founded Veil Begun. The elf Thowitha Misty Seizure became the druid of the Rose of Channeling. The Pure Nut of the Rose of Channeling founded Flash Lathered. The Chestnut Group of the Amethyst Realm founded Fortress Scride. The Buffalo Fiend, Nawara, thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Impervious Citadel, and established a gateway between worlds in Vile Bodice. Nawara became the master of the Hex of Fancying. The Grooved Lies of the Hex of Fancying founded Vile Bodice. The elf Eloth Talk Natures became the druid of the Green Mountain. The Mighty Drink of the Green Mountain founded Sing Whisper. The Skunk Fiend Baritha Veilmenace thrust a spire of slate up from the underworld, naming it the Castle of Quandaries, and established a gateway between worlds in Spidery Drools. Baritha Veilmenace became the master of the Savage Horror. The Kindled Curses of the Savage Horror founded Spidery Drools. And that is the founding of all the main civilizations and their first settlements. Now this is where all the demons, devils, fiends, and other horrible abominations became permanent parts of the material plane. So in 1, the lizard brute Slet Matchburied the fated created Armor Burial. Urn Death was created by the lizard brute Sletmatch buried the faded urn. The Mammoth Devil, the Knock of the Subtlety of Hexes, created Raise Cover. And Night Shimmer, the Bright Cat, was created by Thanaka, the Subtlety of Hexes. The Camel Monster, Engo, created Garlic Cradled. Button Daunt, the Hideous Pillars, was created by Engo. The Lizard Devil, Imi, created Boot Defense. And Crazy Mob was created by Imi. The Black Demon, Akim, created Missearched. And Lustrous Obscure was created by Akim. The Llama Monster, Gore, created Shame Words. And Diamond Cold, the Acrid Whales, was created by Gore. The Rabbit Brute, Pife, created Arch Stockade. And Savage Blazes, the Ignition of Yells, was created by Pife. The Tortoise Monster, Snowdub, created Shell's Dead. And the Dead Tombs was created by the Tortoise Monster, Snowdub. Sinful Curse was created by the Opossum Devil, Ura Menace Wraith. And Ura Menace Wraith created Black Gloves. The Horse Devil, Ugoth Skullspit, created Bulwark Struck. And Rumor Seized, the Frenzy of Shocks, was created by the Horse Devil, Ugoth Skullspit. The Skink Devil, Shastal Fortress Gloves, the Just, created Tower Cut. And Large Esteems was created by Shastal Fortress Gloves, the Just. The Wombat Monster, Asithi, created Helm's Curses. And the Dead Deceiver was created by the Wombat Monster, Asithi. The Scarlet Brute, the Ripe, created Gulf Fenced. And the River of Scales was created by the Scarlet Brute, the Ripe. The One-Eyed Demon, the Aquamarine Petals, created Defense Scarlet. And Sparkle True was created by the One-Eyed Demon, the Aquamarine Petals. The Salt Monster, Kootsmob Wastador, created Healed Hag. And Rag Ruthless, the Poison of Fells, was created by the Salt Monster, Kootsmob Wastador. The Buffalo Fiend, Nowara, created Lance Guard. The Safe Idol was created by the Buffalo Fiend, Nowara. The Skunk Fiend, Beretha Veilmenace, created Lancy Gloves. And Ruin Bolt was created by the Skunk Fiend, Beretha Veilmenace. Now this is where all the other civilizations began to create secondary settlements. So let's look at that. In 1, the Tapered League of the Concerted Union founded Ocean Pepper. The Wraith of Shells of the Savage Horror founded Tepid Hates. The Thief of Wretches of the Amusing Plague founded Trammel Ghouls. The Spider of Glories of the Nightmare of Drying founded Vaulted Spiders. The Plague of Whales of the Sins of Control founded Poison Blazed. The Thunder of Watching of the Rivers of Sport founded Side Incense. The Coalition of Jesting of the Colorless Kingdom founded Twinkling Land. The Artificial Larks of the Smooth Mist founded Polish Shripe. The Morning of Scintillating of the Velvety Fin founded Cobalt Growl. The Council of Caverns of the Kingdom of Certainty founded Sneaked Past. The National Braided Fragrance of the Saffron Sweetnesses founded Drilled Cleanse. The Tin Flag of the Late Razor founded Dagger's Eagle. The Birth of Mirth of the Raven of Rasps founded Crosswave. The Stinky Nightmares of the Witch of Defenders founded Malign Virgins. The Creative Paint of the Rock of Washing founded Lance Trust. The Gold of Barbarians of the Quiet Sword founded Mirror Watch. The Beards of Skinning of the Humid Den founded Webbed Water. The Ghoul of Chilling of the Abysmal Cruelty founded Spider Secret. The Foggy Councils of the Late Realms founded Sprinkle Chance. The Young Handle of the Red Guild founded Submerged Bridge. The Tenebrous Tundras of the Thunder of Strangers founded Sling Tempests. The Last League of the Amethyst Realm founded Fealty Stilled. The Ivory Glazes of the Whip of Workers founded Loved Covens. The Sin of Searching of the Nightmare of Warding founded Ghoul Rose. The Cruelty of Crawling of the Solitary Devil founded Gross Horror. The Superior League of the Confederacies of Dwelling founded Blunt Treats. The Sprayed Spiders of the Hex of Fancying founded Dog Monstrous. The Disemboweled Curse of the Nightmare of Depressing founded Lulled Cruelty. The Beach of Veiling of the Crow of Cudgels founded Fragrant Trained. The Oaks of Heat of the Green Mountain founded Throne Typhoons. The White Monster, the monstrous jackal, founded Feast Monstrous. The Zephyr of Confining of the Roar of Mortification founded Coastal Hides. The Anvil of Lakes of the Courageous Guild founded Strap Blockades. The Cave of Labyrinths of the Nets of Roughness founded Panted Book. The Bronze Dungeon of the Autonomous Spider founded Hated Wax. The Councils of Stopping of the Embraced Unions founded Echo Copper. The Whiskers of Wealth of the Rose of Channeling founded Grip Wasps. The Famous Fellowship of the Nation of Irons founded Heavy Groups. The Squashed Coalition of the Ferocious Confederacy founded Scalded Craft. The Dread of Whiskers of the Labyrinthine Cruelties founded Wraithtoned. The Spongy Group of the Confederacy of Crabs founded Frecklekeeper. The Thief of Traps of the Learned Hate founded Torment Riddled. The Anvil of Gorges of the Whip of Competition founded Bridge Dawn. The Oaken Daggers of the Coincidental Cloisters founded Cobalt Glazes. The Seducer of Mosses of the Fed Demon founded Ruthless Jungles. The Buck of Boots of the Buck of Sieging founded Peltball. The Sizzling Society of the Livid Nations founded Horn Notches. The Flickering Group of the Union of Grooves founded Crest Judge. The Festive Waxes of the Magical River founded Takenperth. The Mahogany of Wheels of the Grey Vault founded Dip Trumpet. The Taut Typhoon of the Fabulous Creature founded Pleated Petals. The Hate of Flies of the Free Nightmares founded Monstrous Judge. The League of Reverences of the Hairy Unions founded Inchcride. The Blowing Society of the Empire of Boards founded Hop Holly. The Romantic Group of the Obedient Union founded Ishimmer. The Pearls of Rhyming of the Wave of Mists founded Jump Guards. The Jaws of Nature of the Closed Embrace founded Sandmint. The Works of Whipping of the Whiskered Spear founded Lightclasp. The Regal Dread of the Merged Deceiver founded Lakes Malign. The Torrid Pass of the Triangular Birds founded Seed Teach. And in one, the Closed Coalition of the Future Confederation founded Wilt Begins. Now these are all things that happened at the very beginning of year one. In many ways, they happened in year zero and carried into the beginning of year one. But now it's time to look at the actual active timeline within the first year. So in the early spring of 1, the human Kusal Tame Passes of the Embraced Unions created the position of lawgiver through force of argument. Kusal Tame Passes became the lawgiver of the Embraced Unions. In the early spring of 1, the Llama Monster Gore of the Merged Deceiver created the position of Chancellor as a matter of course. The Scarlet Brute, the Ripe of the Solitary Devil, created the position of Master of Beasts as a matter of course. In the early spring of 1, the Forgotten Beast Stozu Depthslunk, the Subordinate Sins, attacked the Doom of Curls at Hell Polish and was struck down by a cave dragon in Hell Polish. So let us look at this conflict. The Forgotten Beast Stozu Depthslunk, the Subordinate Sins, was a Forgotten Beast. It was the only one of its kind, a towering, skinless gecko. It has 2 stubby horns, and it squirms and fidgets. Beware its poisonous bite. Stosu was associated with water, caverns, and jealousy. In 1, Stosu began wandering the depths of the world. In the early spring of 1, Stosu attacked the Doom of Curls at Hell Polish. In the early spring of 1, Stosu struck down the goblin Strodno's Stolen Throne in Hell Polish. In the early spring of 1, Stosu was struck down by a cave dragon in Hell Polish. Stosu has 1 notable kill, Strodno's Stolen Throne, the goblin, and 2 other kills of 2 Moneras. But ultimately Stosu was taken down by an unnamed cave dragon. Following this, in the early spring of 1, the Bronze Colossus, a sick, claw-rooted, attacked the stinky nightmares of malign virgins and was struck down by a goblin in malign virgins. Now, the Bronze Colossus, a sick, claw-rooted, was one of the only ones of its kind. A sick was associated with war, strength, and metals. In 1, a sick settled in the dispersed dunes. In the early spring of 1, a sick attacked the stinky nightmares at maligned virgins. In the early spring of 1, the goblin Oots Play Menace tongue was smashed by a sick. A sick struck down the goblin Oots Play Menace in maligned virgins. The goblin Ozid Spider Lies lower left back tooth and upper front tooth was smashed by a sick. A sick ultimately struck down Ozid Spider Lies, Toad Rhythm Monsters, and Nergurgsong Monsters Pointed in malign virgins. But ultimately, in the early spring of 1, a sick was struck down by an unnamed goblin in malign virgins. A sick does have 4 kills, all notable kills: Oots Play Menace, Ozid Spidery Lies, Toad Rhythm Monsters, and Nergurgsong Monsters Pointed. Now, in the mid-spring of 1, the Forest Titan Inale Chanted Dunes, the Oaken, attacked the Cruelty of Crawling at gross horror. The Forest Titan Inale Chanted Dunes, the Oaken, rooted the Cruelty of Crawling of the Solitary Devil and destroyed gross horror. The Camel Monster, Engo, of the Sins of Control, created the position of High Chamberlain as a matter of course. Now, in late spring of 1, the Forest Titan Korrid Natural Boats the Hoary attacked the Council of Caverns at Sneaked Pass. Forest Titan Korrid Natural Boats the Hoary rooted the Council of Caverns of the Kingdom of Certainty and destroyed Sneak Pass. In the late spring of 1, the Rabbit Brute Pyfe, the Fed Demon, created the position of Chamberlain as a matter of course. So very briefly, I want to look at these 2 Forest Titans, Inale Chanted Dunes, the Oaken, and Korrid Natural Boats, the Hoary. So, Inale Chanted Dunes, the Oaken, was a Forest Titan. It was the only one of its kind, a gigantic one-eyed theropod. It has feathered wings and has a regal bearing. Its raw umber feathers are long and broad. Beware its deadly spittle. Inale was associated with animals, rivers, trees, nature, and plants. So in 1, Inale began wandering the jungle of canyons. In the mid-spring of 1, Inale attacked the Cruelty of Crawling at gross horror. Inale struck down the goblin Esther Paddlecruel in gross horror. The goblin Dosnagosp Doomscrew's right upper arm and left hand were smashed by Inale. Inale then struck down Dosnagosp Doomcrews, as well as Stosbub Destinblack. The goblin Aslot Thiefhag's upper arm was ripped by Inale, and he was ultimately struck down by Inale. Then the goblin Song Dredgewitch's right lower arm was smashed by Inale. Inale would go on to not only destroy and strike down Song Dredgewitches, but also strike down Stasot Wicked Seers, M. Salvdoom, and Dang Wraithmolds. The goblin Astrog Blackwitch's right upper leg was smashed by Inale, and Astrog Black Witch was ultimately struck down in gross horror. Inale rooted the Cruelty of Crawling of the Solitary Devil and destroyed gross horror. As far as related entities, Inale's enemies with the Buckle of Goading, the Twigbucks of the Wax of Boars is its lair. It has 9 notable kills and 11 other kills. So it's killed 9 named goblins and 10 unnamed goblins, as well as a bug bat. Now, Korrid Natural Boats the Hoary is also a Forest Titan. It was the only one of its kind. It's a great feathered theropod. So it's a theropod like the previous one, but different. It has a knobby trunk, and it emanates an aura of giving and kindness. Its dark tan feathers are long and narrow. Korod was associated with animals, rivers, trees, charity, nature, and plants. In 1, Korod began wandering the forests of heather. In the late spring of 1, Korod attacked the Council of Caverns at Sneak Pass. In the late spring of 1, Korod struck down the human Con Ringrak and Ego Tomnotch in Sneak Pass. The human Log Flinglong's upper body and left foot was smashed by Korod, and Log Flinglong was ultimately struck down by Korod. The human Nubi Plangif's left cheek was smashed and torn out by Korod. Korod then struck down the human Nubi Plangifs, as well as Koss, Drumbowls, Thora, Luridimple, and Long Jester Garnished, all in Sneak Past. The human Sulthu Scored Goods, upper right back tooth, upper leg, and lower left back tooth were all smashed by Korod. Korod then struck down the human Sulthu Scourgood, Tothil, Dabblestraps, and Refeb Spear Cradled, all in Sneak Past. Korod rooted the Council of Caverns of the Kingdom of Certainty and destroyed Sneak Past. As far as related entities, the Evil of Negators is an enemy, the Ultimate Tongs is an enemy, the Young Handle is an enemy, and the Red Guild is an enemy. As far as related sites, Oakwave, the Ferns of Fording, is its lair. It has 10 notable kills, 10 humans, as well as 31 other kills. A dog, an elephant, 5 humans, another elephant, another dog, 5 more humans, rabbits, donkeys, ravens, mules, alpacas, peahens, billy goats, rams, roosters, dogs, more elephants, guinea cocks, water buffaloes, yaks, boars, llamas. Not even elephants can stand against this thing. And it is an enemy of the Ultimate Tongs, of the Young Handle, and of the Red Guild, the first Dwarven civilization, the Dwarven civilization that I plan on representing. So already I know that Korod Natural Boats, the Hori, is an enemy of mine. And I have to keep my eyes open for a Forest Titan, because you just never know. But now we look at the early summer of 1. The camel monster Engo of the Sins of Control created the position of Master of Beasts as a matter of course. In the early summer of 1, the lizard devil Imi of the Abysmal Cruelty created the position of Master of Beasts as a matter of course. The salt monster Kutzma of Wasted Door of the Learned Hate created the position of Chancellor as a matter of course. The lizard devil Imi of the Abysmal Cruelty created the position of Chief Executioner as a matter of course. And in the early summer of 1, the horse devil Ugoth Skullspit of the Monster's Jackal created the position of Head Chamberlain as a matter of course. Now as we enter the midsummer of 1, we enter battle. Because in the midsummer of 1, Baxtutuzo, the incinerated conflict, began. The incinerated conflict was waged by the Nightmare of Depressing on the Courageous Guild. The most significant cause of the conflict was a dispute over formalized agreement. So in the midsummer of 1, Exus Odmo, the Clash of Gales occurred. In the midsummer of 1, the Nightmare of Depressing attacked the Courageous Guild in the distinct jungles. The goblin Neguslo and Menaces led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Atir Entermere. In the midsummer of 1, the Considerate Union swore to support the Courageous Guild in war if the latter did likewise. In the midsummer of 1, the Buffalo Demon Nawara of the Hexaphancian created the position of the High Chamberlain as a matter of course. In the midsummer of 1, Etos Laws, the Siege of Scarring, occurred. In the midsummer of 1, the Nightmare of Depressing attacked the Royal Manor of the Courageous Guild at Lancegood. The goblin Zolak Monster Clean led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Atir Entermere. In the midsummer of 1, the pillaging of Lancegood occurred. In the midsummer of 1, the Nightmare of Depressing defeated the Courageous Guild and pillaged Lancegood. In the Midsummer of One, the skink devil Shastal Fortress Gloves the Just of the autonomous spider created the position of chief counselor as a matter of course. In the Midsummer of One, Asles Asmrar, the War of Lashes began. The War of Lashes was waged by the learned hate on the Grey Vaults. The most significant cause of the conflict was a dispute over formalized agreement. In the Midsummer of One, Ustrak Olgo, the Battles of Threatening occurred. In the Midsummer of One, the learned hate attacked the Grey Vault in the Steeps of Pungency. The salt monster Kutzmob Wastedoor led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Olon Parch Basement. In the Midsummer of One, the human Kusal Tame passes of the embraced unions created the position of head executioner as a matter of course. In the Midsummer of One, Antustosp, the brutal siege occurred. In the Midsummer of One, the learned hate attacked the mahogany wheels of the Grey Vault at Dip Trumpet. The salt monster Kutzmob Wastedoor led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Olon Parch Basement. In the late summer of One, the wombat monster Asithi of the Nightmare of Warring created the positions of Chamberlain and Keeper of the Seal as a matter of course. In the late summer of One, the human Kusal Tame passes of the embraced unions created the position of Chief Doctor as a matter of course. In the early autumn of One, the Scarlet Brute, the Ripe of the Solitary Devil created the position of High Counselor as a matter of course. In the mid-autumn of One, the Lizard Devil Imi of the Abysmal Cruelty created the position of Keeper of the Seal as a matter of course. In the mid-autumn of One, the human Uso Bulbuswave of the Ferocious Confederacy created the position of Lawgiver through force of argument and became the Lawgiver of the Ferocious Confederacy. In the late autumn of One, Mogozustrak, the Crazed Battles occurred. In the late autumn of One, the Nightmare of Depressing attacked the Considerate Union at the Laconic Plains. The goblin Zolok Monster Clean led the attack, and the defenders were led by the human Ness Chamberfondled. In the late autumn of One, Slaspkokok, the Eviscerated Assault occurred. In the late autumn of One, the Nightmare of Depressing attacked the Band of Moths, the Considerate Union, at Trumpet Joys. The goblin Zolok Steelhood led the attack, and the defenders were led by the human Umil Balance Cuddled. In the late autumn of One, the pillaging of Trumpet Joys occurred. The Nightmare of Depressing defeated the Considerate Union and pillaged Trumpet Joys. The Opossum Devil, Ura Menace Race of the Amusing Plagues created the position of Chamberlain, as a matter of course, in the early winter of One. And in the early winter of One, the Mammoth Devil, Thanaka the Subtlety of Hexes of the Nightmare of Drying created the position of Marshal, as a matter of course. In the early winter of One, Vasifa Silole, the Conflict of Burns, begin. The Conflict of Burns was waged by the Smooth Mists on the Confederacies of Dwelling. One of the most significant causes of the conflict was a dispute over the display of war and hunting trophies. In the early winter of One, Thema Thine, the Sieges of Disembowelment occurred. In the early winter of One, the Smooth Mist attacked the Superior League of the Confederacies of Dwelling at Blunt Treats. The elf Thalir Webfang led the attack, and the defenders were led by the human Kothvir Ambertrue. In the midwinter of One, Dibirith, the Scorching Attack, occurred. In the midwinter of One, the Smooth Mist attacked the group of Zephyrs of the Confederacies of Dwelling at Sprayed Relief. The elf Thalir Webfang led the attack, and the defenders were led by the human Abe Scrubbed Spicy. In the midwinter of One, the Rabbit Brute Pipe of the Fed Demon created the position of Constable through force of argument. At the beginning of Year 2, the dwarf Rovod Ragwaits became the Queen of the Grey Vaults. In 2, the dwarf Atis Nightwalls became the King of the Courageous Guild. And in 2, the elf Maim Glimmerdye became the Druid of the Crow of Cudgels. So, before we move on from the Chronicle, we're going to look at a few things real quickly. Going back up to the beginning of these battles. So the Nightmare of Depressing attacked the Courageous Guild. Now the Considerate Union swore to support the Courageous Guild in battle against the Nightmare of Depressing. So the Nightmare of Depressing was facing the Courageous Guild and then switched its focus over to the Considerate Union. So during the summertime, the Nightmare of Depressing was facing the Courageous Guild. But during the autumn, they made the choice to switch their focus to the Considerate Union. Which shows because essentially what happened was in the midsummer, the Nightmare of Depressing struck the Courageous Guild. The Clash of Gales occurred. Then there was the Siege of Scarring. And once Lancegood was defeated, they pillaged and sacked the town. Once they got their dub on the Courageous Guild, they switched focus to their allies. And the crazed battles occurred, followed by the eviscerated assault, which led to the pillaging of Trumpet Joys. So the Considerate Union ultimately did suffer for joining with the Courageous Guild. But through victory or through loss, perhaps stronger bonds were formed. Of course, there's also the War of Lashes, in which the Learned Hate struck at the Grey Vault. There was the Battles of Threatening, in which 22 goblins, 1 salt monster, 2 trolls, 4 cave dragons, 4 Moneras, 4 jabberers attacked 32 dwarves, and the dwarves suffered 9 losses. In Midsummer of 1, the Learned Hate attacked the Grey Vault at the Steeps of Pungency. The salt monster included Small Waste Door, led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Olon Parch Basements. In Midsummer of 1, the dwarves Eden Tong's Hermits and Calculated Soul Wheels were struck down by cave dragons. And then in the Brutal Siege, in Summer of 1, the Learned Hate attacked the Mahogany Vaults of the Grey Vault at Dip Trumpet. The Salt Monster Recruits Mob Waste Door led the attack, and defenders were led by the dwarf Olon Parch Basement. In Midsummer of 1, the dwarves Toon Taper Axes, Thoth Labor Buds, Ushot Frilly Ringed, Stosu Terror Toes, Olon Parch Basements, Zuglar Played Lashes, Gadol Dagger Subtle, Smutstu Malice Portents, Atir Lace Wheels, Zenag Oily Lance, Shorash Shoot Wires, and Tobal Icy Picks were all struck down. And Olon Parch Basements was the general of the Grey Vault. And he was struck down by the Salt Monster Kutzmob Wastador. So we'll look at the Grey Vault. I suppose we'll also briefly look at the Courageous Guild. And then the last little battle that we have is elves versus humans. Which, 2 battles. The early winter of 1. 14 elves, 3 giant tigers, 4 giant jaguars, 2 elephants. Against 18 humans, 3 elephants, 4 dogs, 22 losses. The defenders were victorious. Though I don't know how. The elves lost nothing. The defenders held on to almost nobody. Nine humans, 2 elephants, 4 dogs. And they still managed to hold out. Wow, that is genuinely impressive. But every time in both battles, their leaders were struck down. Because in this one, Kothvir, Amber True, struck down. In the second battle, Abe Scrub Spicy, struck down. So the humans aren't doing well against the elves. They're defending, but they are taking heavy losses. Whereas the dwarves, it's not going great for the Grey Vault or the Courageous Guild. Hence why, in 2, the dwarf Robod Ragwaits became the queen of the Grey Vault, and the dwarf Atis Nightwalls became the king of the Courageous Guild. And in 2, the elf Maim Glimmerdye became the druid of the Crow of Cudgels. So we can close the Chronicle of Age. We're going to open up civilizations and other entities. Alright, so we're going to look at 3 different dwarven civilizations briefly. All with very different lengths of history. All within 1 year. So the first dwarven civilization we're going to be looking at is Angdomas, the Red Guild. This is the first dwarven civilization, and it's the dwarven civilization that I'm going to be representing. The Red Guild was a dwarven civilization of the Dark Oblivion. In 1, the dwarf Thicket Rhymesack became the general of the Red Guild. In 1, the dwarf Melville Chucktown became the outpost liaison of the Red Guild. In 1, the dwarf English Chameleons became the diplomat of the Red Guild. In 1, the dwarf Easem Pleated Crafts became the queen of the Red Guild. In 1, the ultimate tongs of the Red Guild founded Sterncrafted. In 1, the young Handle of the Red Guild founded Submerged Bridge. In 2, the dwarf Ubel Passion Standards became the Baroness of the Red Guild. It's a very simple history. You know, they founded Sterncrafted, and then they founded Submerged Bridge. They haven't had any conflicts. It's very basic history. It's a really good place to start out at. Now, of course, the other guild is the Courageous Guild. And the Courageous Guild was also a dwarven civilization of the Dark Oblivion. In 1, the dwarf Atir Entremere became the general of the Courageous Guild. Gashud Skinsack became the outpost liaison of the Courageous Guild. Dobar Lancerun became the diplomat of the Courageous Guild. And Lorbam Shoothands became the king of the Courageous Guild. In 1, the Royal Manor of the Courageous Guild founded Lancegood. And in 1, the Anvil of Lakes of the Courageous Guild founded Strat Blockades. Now, in the Midsummer of 1, the Nightmare Depressing attacked the Courageous Guild at the Distinct Jungles, as we know. The Concerted Union then swore to support the Courageous Guild in war if the latter did likewise. And then the battles began with the Nightmare of Depressing attacking the Royal Manor of the Courageous Guild Lancegood and defeating the Courageous Guild and pillaging Lancegood. In the Midsummer of 1, the bodies of the dwarf Atir Entremere, the dwarf Lorbam Staff Paper, the dwarf Lorbam Miracult, the dwarf Urvod Boat Stuffed, the dwarf Odom Tingroofed, the dwarf Limol Steak Prices, the dwarf Eater Guild Rhymes, and the dwarf Doomed Palm Spears were horribly mutilated by the Nightmare of Depressing in Lancegood. In the Midsummer of 1, the bodies of the dwarf Zasset Trailbridged and the dwarf Dodok Bolton Myth were impaled on silver spears by the Nightmares of Depressing in Lancegood. In the Midsummer of 1, the bodies of the dwarf Lorbam Shoothands and the dwarf Kib Bonesbell were impaled on silver spears by the Nightmare of Depressing in Lancegood. They impaled the king of the Courageous Guild on a silver spear in the middle of the summer. That's how they ended the war. That is fucking nuts. They impaled the king. They impaled the king on a silver spear and then started focusing on the humans. And from the sounds of it, the dwarves did not go to back the humans. Their king died. And then the next thing that they do, in the midwinter of 1, is the Courageous Guild holds a performance of the Fancy Intricacy and Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves? They had a half dozen bodies horribly mutilated in the summer. Four bodies impaled on silver spears, including their king. And what do they do the next season? They hold a performance of the Fancy Intricacy in Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves? In the midwinter of 1, the Courageous Guild held a wrestling competition in Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves, competing with the dwarf Dobar Lance Run and the dwarf Tobal Raptor Copper. The dwarf Dobar Lance Run was the victor, the diplomat, who has somehow survived up until this point. In the midwinter of 1, the Courageous Guild held a performance of the Pregnancy of Plays in Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves. In the midwinter of 1, the Courageous Guild held a mace throwing competition in Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves, competing with the dwarf Dobar Lance Run and the dwarf Tobal Raptor Copter. The dwarf Dobar Lance Run was the victor. In the midwinter of 1, the Courageous Guild held a ceremony in Lance Good as part of the celebration of gloves. The event featured a telling the story of the ascension of the dwarf Lorbam Shoothands to the position of king of the Courageous Guild in 1. Images, acrobats, a performance of the Fancy Intricacy, and a recital of the Wings of Sun. Okay, that kind of recontextualizes it. Okay, so the celebration of gloves, it was a funeral. It was a funeral for all the people who died, and they capped it all off by, a big celebration to their king. It's like, and honestly, like, when you think about it, like, after all the horrible things that happened, all those bodies being mutilated, impaled, the king being impaled, what's the best way to move forward and not leave the settlement you have, to maintain those structures that you already had and trying to rebuild? You'll always be haunted with the last big memories being, those things. Maybe having a big celebration, yeah, that makes sense. It's a way for the community to work through it together in that same space where those horrible things happen. Be like, yes, those horrible things happen, but we can still come together and be happy together. That's kind of beautiful. Yeah. And then in 2, the dwarf Deton Drum Paints became a Baroness of the Courageous Guild. The dwarf Kumil Bellsmoothness became the General of the Courageous Guild. The dwarf Thicket Smoothhail became the Outpost Liaison of the Courageous Guild. And the dwarf Atis Nightwalls became the King of the Courageous Guild. That's interesting that Dobar, the diplomat, didn't make any sort of push. Dobar Lanceron was a dwarf. She was the only one of her kind. In 1, Dobar became the diplomat of the Courageous Guild. In the midwinter of 1, the Courageous Guild held a wrestling competition Lance Good that Dobar won, and they held a mace throwing competition that Dobar won. Related historical figures. The Cerulean, object of casual worship, and Etter. I want to look at this Cerulean. The Cerulean was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Courageous Guild. The Cerulean was most often depicted as a male dwarf and was associated with jewels. Okay. So now we'll look at the Grey Vault. The Grey Vault was a dwarven civilization of the Dark Oblivion. In 1, the dwarf Olan Parch Basements became the General of the Grey Vault. The dwarf Sodal Shaken Fountains became the Outpost Liaison of the Grey Vault. The dwarf Zulban Letterlashed became the Diplomat of the Grey Vault. And the dwarf Zeneg Oily Lance became the King of the Grey Vault. In 1, the Furnace of Scholars of the Grey Vault founded Folded Golds. In 1, the Mahogany Wheels of the Grey Vault founded Dip Trumpet. In the Midsummer of 1, the Learned Hate attacked the Grey Vault in the Steeps of Pungency. The Salt Monster, Kutsmob Wastador, led the attack, and the defenders were led by the dwarf Olan Parch Basements. In the Midsummer of 1, the Learned Hate attacked the Mahogany Wheels of the Grey Vault at Dip Trumpet. The Salt Monster, Kutsmob Wastador, led the attack, and defenders were once again led by Olan Parch Basements. Ultimately, though, Olan was struck down. In the midwinter of 1, the Grey Vault held a foot race in folded gold as part of the celebration of hatchets. Competing were the dwarf Sodal Shaken Fountains and the dwarf Zulbin Letter Lashed. The dwarf Sodal Shaken Fountain was the victor. In the late winter of 1, the Grey Vault held a performance of the Aquamarine of Amethysts and folded golds as part of the celebration of hatchets. In the late winter of 1, the Grey Vault held a wrestling competition in folded golds as part of the celebration of hatchets. Competing were the dwarf Sodal Shaken Fountains, the dwarf Zulbin Letterlash, and the dwarf Odom Archteeth. The dwarf Zulbin Letterlash was the victor. In the late winter of 1, the Grey Vault held a ceremony in folded golds as part of the celebration of hatchets. The event featured a telling the story of the ascension of the dwarf Zeneg Oilylance as to the position of king of the Grey Vault in 1. Performance of the Aquamarine of Amethyst Acrobats, a performance of the Tress of Playing, Candles, and Images. In 2, the dwarf Asmal Fancywind became a Baron of the Grey Vault. The dwarf Usher Matchmind became the General of the Grey Vault. And in 2, the dwarf Robod Ragwaits became the Queen of the Grey Vault. Which means Zeneg was struck down by Monera in Dip Trumpet. Wow. So, we've still got the Red Guild open. And the reason we have that open is simply because I want to see which gods and deities are associated with the Red Guild, which is going to be the society we're representing. So, within the Red Guild, we have Mishos, Shadim, and Barrows. There's also Romlem. And the Silky Loot Palace of Vessels. So there are 5 gods in the pantheon of the Red Guild. The first one being Mishos, the dwarven goddess. Mishos was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Red Guild. Mishos was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with the sun, nature, and water. Then there's Shadim. Shadim was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Red Guild. Shadim was most often depicted as a male dwarf and was associated with theft. Now, Barrows Odrozvukar, or Barrows the Fatal Urns, was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Red Guild. Barrows was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with death. Romlam was a deity that also occurs in the myths of the Red Guild. Romlam was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with twilight and creation. And then we have the Biliturkosoth Eral, more commonly known as the Silky Loot Palace of Vessels. The Silky Loot Palace of Vessels was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Red Guild. The Silky Loot Palace was most often depicted as a male dwarf and was associated with crafts. So Romlam is our twilight goddess, and Mishos is our sun goddess. And there are no gods in the dark. At least none that we pray to. So, we are almost done looking at all the lore. There's just a couple more things I want to address. We're not going to look at the historical figures. We're not looking at sites. We're not looking at regions, underground regions. We're done with civilizations and other entities. We don't need to look at structures. Don't need to look at chronicles by age. The only thing we could really see in structures, we could actually just find right here in the Red Guild, which would be looking up the actual places themselves. But again, they don't say much. Submerged Bridge was a hillux. In 1, the young handle of the Red Guild founded Submerged Bridge. Sterncrafted was a fortress. In 1, the Ultimate Tongs, the Red Guild founded Sterncrafted. In 2, the Dwarf Ubel Passion Standards settled in Sterncrafted. Ubel Passion Standards was a dwarf. She was one of the only ones of her kind. In 2, Ubel became the Baroness of the Red Guild and settled in Sterncrafted. So the last thing that we're going to be looking at is going to be codices, scrolls, and etc. And as I said when we first started looking at the lore, there's no books, there's no scrolls. It's simply just slabs. The slabs of Slade that were thrust up from the underworld by the different devils, demons, and fiends in association with many gods and deities. And we're going to look at those 17 slabs. So the first slab that we have is Earndeath. Earndeath was a legendary elder leaf slab. All craftsmanship is of the highest quality. The slab reads, I am Baru Sishbaru, Baru Ashblade, once of the underworld. By Rakust, I bind myself to this place. Now a notable thing to note is that Baru's name holds enough power that it is consistent through the translation. Baru Sishbaru remains Baru Ashblade. In 1, Earndeath was created by the lizard brute Slet Matchbury, the fated Urn. In 1, Rakust aided the lizard brute Sloot Matchburied, the fated Urn, in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of suicide. The ritual took place in armor burial using Earndeath. Rakust was a deity that occurs in the myths of the coincidental cloisters. Rakust was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with suicide and death. In 1, Rakust aided the lizard brute Slet Matchburied, the fated Urn, in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of suicide. That is all Rakust has done. Relatively small influence compared to other deities. Now we have Night Shimmer, the Bright Cat. This is a limonite slab that reads, I am Thudel Umorhorir, Thudel the Bad Demon, once of the underworld. By Isle, I bind myself to this place. Thudel's name is also consistent through the translation. In 1, Isle aided the mammoth devil Thanaka the subtlety of hexes, becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of lies. The ritual took place in Ray's Cover, using Night Shimmer, the Bright Cat. Isle also aided the black demon Akim in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of day. The ritual took place in Mistsearch, using Lustrous Obscure. Lustrous Obscure was a legendary sphalerite slab that read, I am Iramira, the Radiant Day, once of the underworld. By Isle, I bind myself to this place. So the Radiant Day became the black demon Akim and was brought into this world after Isle was pondering the inevitable subtleties of day. Now we have Button Dot, the Hideous Pillars. This was a flickering metal slab that read, I am Uzaton Smaspest, Roarsmoths the Gristly, once of the underworld. By Emton, the Silken Owl of Creations, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Emton, the Silken Owl of Creations, aided the camel monster Engo in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of nightmares. The ritual took place in Garlic Cradled, using Button Dot the Hideous Pillars. Emton, the Silken Owl of Creation, was a deity that occurs in the myths of the Quiet Sword. Emton was most often depicted as a male dwarf and was associated with labor, nightmares, the night, and darkness. In 1, Emton aided the camel monster Engo in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of nightmares. So Emton is the dark god to my twilight and sun god. And he comes from the Quiet Sword. But Emton only brought one entity into this world, so again, mild influence. Now we have Crazy Mob. a legendary nickel-silver slab that reads, I am Ugok Smunstu, Rainy Lies, once of the underworld. By Otong the sports of adventuring, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Otong the sports of adventuring aided the lizard devil Imi in becoming a permanent part of the living world that great fortresses might be razed and tested in siege. Otong the sports of adventuring was a deity that occurs in the midst of the Grey Vaults. Otong was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with chaos, war, and fortresses. Otong Aned Sinath is likely the most influential dwarven god or goddess that currently exists, because Otong aided the lizard devil Imi, becoming a permanent part of the living world, that great fortresses might be razed and tested in siege. But Otong also aided the rabbit brute Pyth in becoming a permanent part of the living world to sow the seeds of chaos therein. Otong then aided the skink devil Shastal Fortress Gloves the Just in becoming a permanent part of the living world so that great fortresses might be razed and tested in siege, just the same as the lizard devil Imi. So a rabbit brute was brought into this world to bring chaos, and he brought in a lizard and a skink devil to raise and test fortresses in siege. But that's not all Otong did, because Otong also aided the buffalo fiend Nawara in becoming a permanent part of the living world that war might rage forever. But that wasn't enough, because Otong then aided the skunk fiend Beretha Veilmenace in becoming a permanent part of the living world that war would continue to rage forever. So he brought in 2 devils so that fortresses might be built and tested in siege, and he brought in 2 fiends to make sure that war never ends, and he brought in a brute to sow the seeds of chaos to bring it all together. And that's a dwarven goddess of the Grey Vault. So it makes sense why the Grey Vault's been through some things within its first year. So we've looked at Crazy Mob. We'll look at Savage Blazes, the Ignition of Yells, a legendary malachite slab that reads, I am Quothest, Ataknakuv, Quothest, Hated Veiled, once of the underworld. By Otong the sports of adventuring, I bind myself to this place. Now, Savage Blazes, the Ignition of Yells, was stored in Archstock Cave by the rabbit brute Pyth in 1. Interesting. Now we have Largesteams, which is in Tower Cut. Largesteams was a legendary selenite slab that read, I am Vare Carvere, Tooth Knights, once of the underworld. By Otong the sports of adventuring, I bind myself to this place. Then there's the Safe Idol, a legendary shell slab that reads, I am Thoth Sod, Thoth the Misty, once of the underworld. By Otong the sports of adventuring, I bind myself to this place. And lastly, Rulebold, a legendary brimstone slab that reads, I am Zushtash Luslem, the Ancient of Puzzling, once of the underworld. By Otong the sports of adventuring, I bind myself to this place. Believe we looked at Lustrous Obscured? Yes, Akim. We've not looked at Diamond Cold, the Acrid Whales. This was a legendary bismuth bronze slab that reads, I am Asubsnob, the Glum Rust, once of the underworld. By Alron Pungent Ditches, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Alron Pungent Ditches aided the llama monster Gore in becoming a permanent part of the living world in order that acts of torture be perpetrated. The ritual took place in Shame Words, using Diamond Cold's The Acrid Whales. Alron Pungent Ditches was a deity that occurs in the midst of the Courageous Guild. Alron was most often depicted as a female dwarf and was associated with torture, misery, and mountains. Explains why the Courageous Guild's been going through some shit alongside the Grey Vault. We've looked at Savage Blazes, the Ignition of Yells. Now let's look at the Dead Tombs. The Dead Tombs was a legendary salt pepper slab that read, I am Atak Skukib, the Hateful Evils, once of the underworld. By the spry, I bind myself to this place. In 1, the spry aided the tortoise monster Snowdove in becoming a permanent part of the living world that more might die. The ritual took place in Shell's Dead, using the dead tombs. Which, the thematic vibe of that is perfect. A tortoise monster having a ritual take place in a place called Shell's Dead, using the dead tombs. It's perfect. Now, the spry was a deity that occurs in the midst of the nets of roughness. The spry was most often depicted as a male dwarf and was associated with rebirth and death. Now, Sinful Curse. The legendary mudstone slab that reads, I am Ugith Nalthish, Necromenace, once of the underworld. By Lomoth, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Lomoth aided the opossum devil Ura Menace Wraith, becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the ineffable subtleties of murder. The ritual took place in Black Gloves, using Sinful Curse. Now we'll look at Rumor Seized, the Frenzy of Shocks. The pyrolusite slab that reads, I am Shaveth Muved, Zikkelzimun. Mystery oozes the fierce calluses, once of the underworld. By Ulet Board Savior, the Absolute, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Ulet Board Savior, the Absolute, aided the horse devil Ugoth Skullspit in becoming a permanent part of the living world that war might rage forever. The ritual took place in Bulwark Struck, using Rumor Seized, the Frenzy of Shocks. Ulet Board Savior, the Absolute, was the deity that cursed in the myth of the Union of Grooves. Ulet was most often depicted as a female human, was associated with war, victory, and nightmares. We've looked at large esteems. But we haven't not looked at the Dead Deceiver. The Dead Deceiver was a legendary dacite slab that reads, I am the Gokang, once of the underworld. By Uja Tomb Seduce, the ungodly urn, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Uja Tomb Seduce, the ungodly urn, aided the wombat monster Scythe in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the ineffable subtleties of death. The ritual took place in Helm's Curses, using the Dead Deceiver. Uja Tomb Seduce, the ungodly urn, was a deity that occurs in the myths of the late realms. Uja was most often depicted as a male human and was associated with murder and death. Now we have the River of Scales. The River of Scales was a legendary glowing metal slab that reads, I am Rico Tosreon, Rico the Sprayed Gutters, once of the underworld. By Emtha, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Emtha aided the Scarlet Brute the Ripe in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the ineffable subtleties of fish. The ritual took place in Gulfenst, using the River of Scales. Again, that's the thematic. The River of Scales, the ineffable subtleties of fish. I like it. And then we have the Scarlet Brute the Ripe, which sounds pretty cool. It was the only one of its kind. A huge buffalo twisted into humanoid form with lidless eyes. It knows and intones the names of all it encounters. Its scarlet hair is long and shaggy. Beware its webs. The Ripe was associated with deformity, fishing, disease, fish, and oceans. So it knows and intones the names of all it encounters. So the second it meets someone, it knows their name, and it memorizes it. That's pretty cool. Now we have Sparkle True. This is a diorite slab that reads, I am Rolfo Lavamara, the Fatal Tentacles, once of the underworld. By Mater Knowledge Meadow, the Meandering, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Mater Knowledge Meadow, the Meandering aided the one-eyed demon at the Aquamarine Petals in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the ineffable subtleties of inspiration. The ritual took place in Defense Scarlet using Sparkle True. Now we have Reg Ruthless, the Poison of Bells. This is a Gabbro slab that reads, I am Aval Tikathal, Zagstock Ugoth, Loveplay, the muck of belches, once of the underworld. By Bengal, I bind myself to this place. In 1, Bengal aided the salt monster Kutzmob Wastador in becoming a permanent part of the living world after pondering the inevitable subtleties of depravity. The ritual took place in Heelpeg, using Reg Ruthless, the poison of Fells. Now we've looked at the safe idol, which brought in the Buffalo Fiend Nawara, which is interesting because the Ripe is also a buffalo, just a different form of buffalo. And we've also looked at Rulable, which means we've looked at the lore. That's it. That's the lore. That's the history of the first year of the Dark Oblivion, of Umomnar. We've done it. We've read it. We've been through it. That's the lore. It only took an hour and 27 minutes, almost an hour and 28 minutes, but we got through all the lore. We were able to contextualize a lot of it, you know, the conflicts, and even come up with reasons to why some of these conflicts occurred. It's like, why was the Grey Vault and the Courageous Guild attacked in those first years? Well, maybe because some of their gods and deities are focused on testing them with war and battle and sieges. Thankfully, the Red Guild holds no such dark deities. That's where we're going to call this lore stream to an end. And when we return, we will be starting a fresh world in Umomnar. We will embark with a group to start a settlement. It's going to be great.